We're good to go. Awesome.
Good to
Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to our first meeting of the Goal 4 Subcommittee for the State Workforce Development Board. I appreciate all of you being here today, and Sabina and Drake, thanks for pulling us together. I think we will start with some quick framing and expectations before we do introductions as per our agenda. And I am pulling up goal 4 right now, and I'm going to attempt to share my screen. This always goes well the first try. How about that? Do we have that?
How about that? Yeah.
Awesome. And maybe I should zoom in a tiny bit. There we go. So this committee is the Goal 4 subcommittee, and we are here to increase post-secondary graduate retention. So by 2027, increase the number of college and university graduates who remain in Vermont to live and work after graduation. Within that, we settled on some strategies: strengthen employer connections and job placement, identify and address barriers to retention. Pardon my scrolling for a second and don't get dizzy. Promote community integration and engagement, align higher education and workforce development, and develop shared messaging to promote graduate retention. And I will keep scrolling for just 1 second and then I will stop. Highlighting our desired outcomes. So higher graduate retention and employment, stronger connections between employers and education partners, reducing barriers to staying in Vermont, greater graduate connection and belonging, and unified messaging and shared vision. Is there more on the next page? No, just that. Not really just that, though. That's a lot for us to work on. So this is our first meeting, really the launch. So that's sort of the basis of it. And our charge is to figure out what we're going to do with this, what actions we're going to take, who else we're going to bring into this conversation, and all of that fun stuff. So as for the purpose of this first meeting is to really start talking about all of that and then determine some next steps. And we have the wonderful support of Drake here, who's going to keep us on track and moving through each step of the process. And with your help, I'll be a maybe okay chair of this subcommittee. So I appreciate all of you being here. Drake, Sabina, is there anything I missed in that kind of framing and quick charge review?
I don't think so. I think that's great. The one thing I'll just say, which may be a broken record at this point, is that, the board has approved these documents, but they're meant to evolve and change based on the needs of the workforce and the desire of board members to work on. So I think I sort of see it as more of a menu or like a framework to work within rather than, a top down, this is what this committee will do, which is good because I think, as Phil has pointed out, it's very ambitious. If you were all to decide we're going to make progress on each of these items, like that's not realistic. So we're hoping to start to think about like what comes first. I know that folks have really expressed to us a desire to want to make some tangible progress. And so we're hoping that the subcommittees can be a forum for great, active, proactive work. So, just all that to say, this should not be limiting or overly prescriptive, but just provide an opportunity for us to think about, what do you all want to work on, and who else should we be inviting to the table. So one other just like sort of operational comment is this is a small group because this group represents the board members who are interested in participating in this committee. Scott wasn't able to join us, so it's great to have Patrick here from VSAC. But you'll see on the agenda, we want to have a discussion about who else should be joining this committee as non-board member participants. So, really hoping that the structure of the committees is coming second to what is going to work best for y'all. So just want to, I've said it many times at this point, but we want to do whatever is, aligned with what y'all want to work on. So this is where we're starting, but it's not going to be where we end up. And just appreciate y'all jumping in. I think this goal is, there's a lot of really exciting work for us to all do together to make progress on this.
Thank you for all that framing, Drake. That's really helpful. And you can remind us of all of that as many times as you want. I think it's helpful. I know I always try to jump ahead and solve all of the problems all at once, and I think this committee will be a great group to solve some of the parts of some of the problems or challenges, or take advantage of some of the opportunities to frame it a little more positively. So appreciate you. And with that, I think we can move into member introductions, hopes, and goals. So if we can, we'll go around, everybody introduce yourself, who you're representing, which may be or may not be what motivated you to participate in this subcommittee. So perhaps your interest in this subcommittee in particular. And the follow-up question, all of that once we get through your introduction, and we can also have a little bit of conversation about this after the introductions, hopefully, is speaking today and based upon what we know so far, so you don't need to imagine everything we're going to do, but what would success look like after 12 to 18 months for you? And what is our role and what isn't our role, which I already told Drake as we were preparing for this meeting. That is a lot to accomplish in 10 minutes, but maybe we'll just kind of start that conversation. And I'm happy to either do this popcorn style and someone can jump in, or I can call on people. I'm comfortable either way.
I'm happy to popcorn in and
Perfect.
just
Thanks,
get us
Betsy.
going. So hi, everyone. I'm Betsy Hassan. I am the Director of Nursing Education and Professional Development at the UVM Medical Center. I'm really here representing healthcare workers beyond nursing. And so my interest in this particular goal was, I am someone that is from Vermont, went away for a period of time and then came back, and wanting to make that more of a norm, and having people stay here, live here, have their families here. So I want to help do that.
I can hop in. Rob Terry, I'm at Merck Forest and Farmland Center down in southwestern Vermont in the Taconic Mountains. So we have about 26 employees, some full-time, some part-time, some seasonal. And one of the things I get to do that I really love about my position is work a lot in an education or like kind of work and learn environment with both a fair number of high school and undergraduate students. And on the working land side, and just see a tremendous amount of talent and passion in the state that we're ultimately losing because there's not a lot of right time transitions for those folks. And at the same time, when we do have positions open up here, because of boundaries and barriers, they can often be really hard to fill. So having that same experience in a single institution where I'm watching us lose talent and really struggling to recruit talent at the same time is why I'm really interested in collaborating with everybody on the call to see what, if anything, we might be able to do to help kind of line those two things up across the state a little better.
I can jump in. Hi, everybody. Patrick Leduc with Vermont Student Assistance. Been here about 30 years in various roles, currently sitting as the Chief Operating Officer. I think, VSAC works with a lot of students that are coming to Vermont to go to school, and we work with many, many students in schools, high schools and middle schools across the state, trying to help them navigate their process. While we don't necessarily lean into, you have to go to school in Vermont, we definitely highlight the Vermont institutions and the Vermont opportunities. And we know with the reduced students that are coming through that program that we need more and more students prepared for the jobs that are going to be available in Vermont. So there's a lot of vested interest from VSAC's perspective in making sure that once we get them into that training program or that college program that's going to fit them up for a career, that they can stay in Vermont and support our communities and bring the next generation up. So we're all in on this.
Thank you. Drake and Sabana, do you want the opportunity to go, or do we all know you enough? I think you should go.
I can say, and then Phil, you should go too.
Yes, I will.
Okay, great. I think that so I'm the Deputy Director of the Office of Workforce Strategy and Development, supporting the work of this subcommittee. And I will just say, personally, this is a goal that really interests me. as someone who moved to Vermont for grad school many years ago at this point. It's I've been able to stay here, for I think going on 15 years now, which has been incredible. But it has been difficult as someone who's had a lot of opportunities, a lot of privilege, and a lot of people who've championed me in my career. And I have I know and kind of wish they could have, or now folks in my personal life who are starting to want to come back, and it's really difficult to do that. And in my professional experience, there are so many different programs that exist to support Vermonters to access education and to stay here and upskill. And I think there's a lot of really great work to do to figure out how to um, better communicate those programs, learn from the success or not of those programs, and I think make better informed decisions about how to support Vermonters through scholarships, loan repayment, retention bonuses, what have you. There are a lot of programs passed during the pandemic with one-time dollars. It's kind of a little zooming in at this moment, but I just think there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of alignment across different systems to have these conversations. And I think that you all as board members have a really great opportunity to play like a convening, aligning, strategic communication role, and just think there's a lot of really great work that I'm particularly excited to support. So appreciate that y'all are willing to work on it, because I think this could be really fun.
Thanks, Drake. Sabina? You might be muted.
Sabina, you're muted.
I just figured it out. Sorry. I'm Sabina Haskell, Executive Director of the Office of Workforce Strategy and Development. I think I know all of you. From my VSEC days, when I worked with Patrick, we are one of the top states for bringing students in and one of the top states for having them all leave. So this is particularly interesting and important to me. Like, why can't we get more people to stay here? That they love to come to school here. Let's get them to get more to stay here. So that's why I'm interested in this.
Thanks, Sabina.
Yep.
And I'm Phil Coling. I'm the Executive Director of Serve Vermont, the State Service Commission. So we oversee AmeriCorps programming, and we have about 200 members per year, a little lower than that right now. And it's about 60% of those folks who relocate to serve. In any given year, that goes up and down. But we very much feel aligned with this goal because a lot of folks use service as a bridge from their college in Vermont to whatever their career might be. We are talking post-secondary graduate retention, but we also attract people who graduate from elsewhere to serve here, which is what brought me to Vermont. And in November, that'll be 20 years ago. Came for a service position. And then actually I break all of these goals because I left for a little while, but then I did come back, and I'm not from here originally. So who knows where I fit in. And when I say that, I'm also open to like trying to potentially change some of the words we're using, because it's about retaining folks, but it's also about attracting folks. And I'm interested in any conversation anytime about attracting folks to Vermont and providing them opportunities to stay. When I hear about brain drain and all those types of challenges, I don't really relate very well to that, because we're constantly finding folks who are coming here and saying, hey, I heard about this and I'm really interested in it, or I wanted to try somewhere new and let's see where this leads. And then having been in this work for 15 years in Vermont now, we see folks who come to serve and then end up in pretty wild positions throughout government, throughout the nonprofit sector, and the private sector too. So that's what spoke to me about this goal in particular. We have a couple of minutes on our agenda. If anyone wants to take a crack at anything you have to say about what success of this committee would look like in 12 to 18 months, if there's something in particular. Drake, I heard you say convening and aligning, which is certainly part of our role which is part of that question. Do others have any initial thoughts about where we should end up in 12 to 18 months, or what is our role and what isn't? Yeah, Betsy.
I'm curious if there's a space for, and someone can help with our role and what this would be, but really being able to have some comprehensive resources available to either employers or academic partners that support whatever our initiatives on retention are. So like making sure that there's some tangible resources for people to use.
Do you have an example of what you mean?
I think about like, there's lots of disparate information out there right now for individuals who want to be employed, and I'll just use healthcare. We have some programs that are offered by AHEC. We have some, loan repayment programs that are offered through VSAC. We have sort of these little pockets, and it's not really well distributed or cohesive in a way that someone who maybe just looking on their own would be able to find everything that's available to them.
Gotcha. Kind of like a toolkit.
Yeah. I'll add one thing, Phil, that just is in my brain a little bit, and maybe this is just because of the lens that I put in because we're working with high school kids and middle school kids in Vermont. We have a lot of conversations that are all very appropriate and helpful about kind of enticing people to stay in Vermont, and I think we need to also have a balance of not just enticing but exciting people to stay in Vermont, right? Because it's one thing to say I've got to entice them. That's almost like I'm trying to equalize the playing field so you'll stay. But I think there's a lens of how do we excite people to stay in Vermont, which I think could be a very powerful perspective.
To hit on, I think it's related to both of those things, but Sabina, when you asked, what's an example of what that would look like, I think of in our world, in the AmeriCorps world, by chance sometimes I will see pamphlets out somewhere. It used to be, if I go into a college, like sometimes in student life, you'd see a little pamphlet that we didn't put there that maybe has some accurate national level information, but nothing too specific about us. And so I do think this communication piece, bringing folks together, coming up with this kind of standard, I'm going to call it a kit. I don't know how I'm going to call it a kit for now, that would outline all these possibilities and connect pieces. And maybe it is by profession in some, or field in some cases, but also like generally, okay, so you're graduating, and yes, here's the career fair, and yes, there's all this information, but here's this kind of standard package that you all get to look at once. So we know, that as a whole, we're making sure everybody knows about all of these opportunities versus by chance I happened to learn about AmeriCorps because I found an outdated pamphlet in the basement of my student union building or whatever it might be. Anything else on this piece?
Yeah, I'm curious in that packet, Philip, thinking about the AmeriCorps side of things, when you're bringing folks into the state, they're often, I imagine, or at least sometimes, coming in without much of a support network and much awareness about how to create a soft landing in the community that they're going to be in. I wonder if a packet like this needs some sort of complementary resource that's not only about the, sort of nuts and bolts of career transition, but also, okay, maybe you started in Chittenden County and now you're headed into Bennington County. What are the resources? What are the sort of human services resources available to you in Bennington County to help ease that transition, make a soft landing if you don't have good family or friend connections down there?
Make your community. Yeah.
Yep.
That
And I
makes me
think
think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
right now we address that kind of ad hoc, program by program, or host sites, which the places AmeriCorps members ultimately serve, handle that on a one-off basis because they're in whatever particular community. But I think in terms of the stuff that would be most useful for us in our programming, I think would also be useful for somebody coming here for school or somebody looking for a job, period. Like kind of a welcome to whatever region type packet, maybe some alignment with some of the stuff that the Agency of Commerce and Community Development has thrown out. The oh, help
Think
me.
Vermont.
Think Vermont. Thank you. Sorry, I should have thought of that. But like the Think Vermont type thinking. Yeah, thanks, Rob. I appreciate that thought for sure.
Yeah. And I know that Heather Pelham has presented to I believe it's the executive committee of the board on what's happening in the Department of Tourism and Marketing at ACCD. So I think that, this seems like an area where if y'all are interested, like collaborating with that team to determine, what do they have? Because there may be toolkits and resources that already exist that just aren't well known, and figuring out how to make the sort of like workforce connection. Maybe there's work to do with like the RDCs or other community organizations. I think that could be great. And Betsy, your comment about, what resources exist and how can we better align those, that's definitely stuff that we hear all the time as a need. And I do wonder, I know I've talked to Scott about this in the past, and I think this has happened in different iterations over the years, but in addition to compiling information on all of those resources, I think there could be, and maybe I'm getting a little ahead of us, Phil, here,
Keep
but
going.
doing some sort of exploration of like which support programs have really helped people and been the most effective, and what, how can we better, direct policy choices or funding choices at the state level by sort of taking the best of what has worked in different, is it sector specific? Should things be more universal? Is one form of support more effective than another? I think there could be some interesting work to do some outreach to folks who've participated in some of those programs to learn a little bit more about what worked for them and what could be improved. And the board definitely has some interesting potential work to engage in with that sort of like stakeholder engagement that we could really be supporting. And I'll stop talking.
That's a great transition though into our next topic. So alignment with existing initiatives, and if we can start to talk about identifying priority indicators to guide our early work. And our goal is to have a very broad conversation. There's no specific starting point or pre-existing assumption. I think we kind of started with alignment with existing initiatives already. A few have been thrown out. I'm taking notes. I know Drake's taking notes. I think Sabina's taking notes too. So we won't miss these. But anyone want to jump right in and kick off on either of those two?
Well, I can pose a question around the indicators perhaps, and probably a question for Sabina and Drake. What kind of access to state level data is plausible to look at people that are in the state? Obviously, there's things like tax records and unemployment, things like that. Is that data that is potentially available to use as a tracking for indicators?
$100 million data question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no centralized hub. Like you're saying, you could go to tax and get this and that. We have labor market information at the Department of Labor, which is census stuff. It's connecting it and yeah.
I think one of the questions for this group to think about is what are the data points that we would want in an ideal world, and then figure out, do we have them? Have we just not asked for them in the right way? Is that something that we want to work on together? One thing I will share is we've been working with a group called the PSEO Coalition, Post-Secondary Employment Outcomes, which is a multi-state project of the U.S. Census that would combine, and we can share some information with y'all about this, but it combines information that we're already sharing with the US Census from the Department of Labor with information from post-secondary institutions. So maybe that's something we could talk about at a future meeting. The Department of Labor and the office are very interested in Vermont participating. It's free. And then the higher ed institutions need to agree to share their information. So it's not a cost to them, except that the time, has a cost for them to share that information, but it can show, wage data at 1, 5, and 10 years post-graduation, migration flows, stuff by program, by
And
degree type.
yeah.
Okay.
So I think that will hopefully be some data that we have not really had access, that we haven't had access to in the past, combining those two data sets. I know there are a lot of folks who talk a lot about what they think the reality is, and then, different post-secondary institutions have those numbers too, but having something comprehensive, we're hoping can move us forward in that direction. And the post-secondary institution, we've spoken with UVM and the state colleges, and they're both interested. So we're continuing to move that forward, but could be pretty cool. I'll actually pop a link to that in the chat so y'all can take a look, because you can see other states.
That'd be great.
But it's pretty great.
There's 37 states now and over 1,000 institutions. Because Idaho, and I can't remember the other one who joined last week, or they made the press release. So New Hampshire and Vermont are the only ones who aren't in New England.
Okay.
And you all are the folks who sign us into that? Or
So VDOL just talks
Okay.
to Census about, like, you can use this information for this. There's no additional, like, opting in on the state side. It's up to the post-secondary institutions to agree to participate and share their information. But there have been a lot of conversations about it, and we're continuing to do what we can to support that conversation.
Do you know, do either of you know, or have you had a chance to look at that? And of those 37 states, are there any bright spots?
I mean, states that are doing the right stuff?
Yeah.
It's a good question. I haven't really dug a ton into other state data, but maybe we can reach out to the folks at PSEO and see if they have any best practices or potential states for us to get in touch with. Yeah, I love that. Put that on my follow-up list.
Yeah, and also talk to Matt, Matt Barowitz, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And this has me wondering, so one of the questions we ask is what percentage of our alums stay in Vermont after service? And I'm sure schools ask a similar question and have some kind of metric, like what are you doing after graduation? I have no idea where that data lives. I think I'm looking at VSAC and VSAC adjacent folks who might have more of that than I do.
Yeah, it's a great question. So non-Title IV schools, right? Non-degree granting institutions or training programs, it's really hard to get that data. Period. Because we run the advancement grant program, we have some kind of data, and we're actually considering whether we want to kind of ramp that up a little bit. Right now we get outcome data at the very broad level about whether or not they're successfully employed after but we don't know where they're employed. So we could improve that a little bit by formalizing that process a little bit more, which could be gather some good data for us.
I would imagine that some of our post-secondary institutions are tracking this in different ways. So I wonder if a potential future meeting could be, inviting some of those folks to come talk to us about what they're experiencing, what are some barriers, like how can this group be helpful?
I would agree. I think, maybe my instinct says maybe to start with admissions, because they're the ones marketing to people that you're going to get a good job, and they're the ones trying to sell that data to get new people in. It might be interesting at some point to talk to some of the people that are running the career placement offices at the post-secondary institutions to see how they're communicating and what information they may have. We've started that relationship over the last couple of years to kind of connect to those groups, similar to the same reasons you guys are talking about. So that may be who else you might want to have at the table at least once or twice.
Which is only getting ahead of ourselves one agenda item in like 5 minutes. So we're totally okay with heading that direction.
Well, I
I
think,
appreciate that.
Let's try to be
you
efficient.
know, it's great. Well, it's related. It's important because I think one thing that we've heard in, discussions with board members and with the legislature this session is a lot of folks are curious, like, how are you measuring success? And I think before you all can decide what you want to do about that, having an understanding of the current state is really important. And I know Phil and I have talked a bunch about, what's the right metric, indicator, data point that is something that the board can actually make measurable progress in, right? If you're saying, the State Workforce Development Board is going to increase post-secondary graduate retention by 10% in 2 years, like that's probably not super realistic because it's also, there's a lot that goes into those types of data points that is beyond anyone's control. So just thinking about like how to build some metrics or indicators, not having that be the whole work of the committee, but to start thinking about like what is going to be representative of the work and impact that you all have and how you're all, envisioning this issue. So again, not anything that really needs to be figured out in this moment, but good food for thought at minimum.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Drake. And I think just speaking now, just from my perspective in the AmeriCorps arena, defining success is really difficult too, because we would love if every single person who serves in Vermont then stays in Vermont, or at least in theory we would. But we have folks who are like you, Betsy, who are from somewhere, come here to serve so that they have experience somewhere else, and they know they're going back to wherever when they're done because that's what they want to do. And is that a bad thing? No, because I would also hope that some Vermonters choose to go somewhere else and serve in AmeriCorps and then come back. And we don't really care. like it's not a bad thing, it's a very good thing. But then how do we turn that into a metric that informs our work? That's the piece where, I'm only talking about 200 people per year, and we have a really tough time kind of defining, okay, so if somebody does this, that is success, because there's so many different versions of what that looks like. Or like the folks who graduate, join AmeriCorps, and then when we're saying, okay, do you have a job in Vermont? Like we're hoping everybody says yes, to say, actually, I'm going to hike the Long Trail this summer. Happens almost every year. There's a few people who say, oh man, that doesn't really help us in terms of metrics, but like, what are you going to do after that? You just don't know yet. And like, what a great experience to then have. And then Rob, I'm guessing some of those folks would be just the kind of folks you're looking for if they do want a job when they're done. And so it gets really complicated. And thank you, Drake, for giving us permission to not figure this out in the moment, because I don't think we're going to. But I think that's the direction we're headed of, let's identify some metrics or metrics we would like to have if we don't have the data yet that can kind of inform our work.
Yeah, absolutely. The only thing I would add quickly to that too is I think even if we don't have the mechanism to gather the data that we want yet, identifying the metric can also help us tie back to whatever inputs we want to create that we think would move towards that goal. And then in the short term, we can monitor volume in those inputs, right? Because we're going to have to do stuff for a while before you see outcome on the metric side.
Yep. And I'll just add to some of that data point. So obviously this is a very small, just like you were just saying, Phil, a small end count here, but Betsy mentioned the loan forgiveness programs that VZEC administers on behalf of the state. And so for that, you have an obligation, if you're going to get that scholarship and you don't want it to turn into a loan, then you're obligated to work in Vermont for a couple of years, depending on how many years of tuition you got. So obviously we have that data because we'd have to track those loans. So maybe there's something learning about how that mechanism works that might feed into some other stuff that we want to think about doing down the road.
Yeah, I love that. And I think I said this already, but I used to work in childcare space, and there were a number of programs that were put into place with one-time COVID money around student loan repayment, scholarships, That, and a lot of that, I think during that period of time was one-time dollars very specifically applied to certain sectors and certain strategies. And I think I'm sure there are people who are reporting back on the outcomes of those programs, but I do wonder, maybe selecting a few different types of programs, that are targeted to different populations or different areas of supporting folks to stay here could be an interesting way to start some sort of like a qualitative slash quantitative
Yeah.
data project. And because I know that work is still super important and those needs are still ever present. And, the cost of education doesn't seem to be getting any better. Like it's just increasing. So thinking about like what lessons can be learned and then, what practices or program designs could be elevated. And I also hearing what folks are talking about in terms of what success looks like as it relates to metrics. I'm hearing a lot about awareness of options as a thing folks want to work on, right? And I think that's the case across a lot of components of our workforce development system and just across the state in general is not enough folks know what's available. And I do think projects around like increasing awareness or cohesion or alignment or communication of what already exists could be a really great addition to our system that this board could have a role in, and something like that could find ways to measure it. Just, how do we make sure that folks who come here for school, who stay here for school, who have left for school, know that there are options to be here and start to combat some of those narratives around Vermont not being a place that has any jobs or well-paying jobs or housing's too expensive. Some of those things are obviously true to some extent, but I do think there's some perceived barriers and that maybe aren't the case if we are able to get the word out a little bit more. And that goes to the excitement piece, right, Patrick, about like letting folks know there are a lot of different pathways to come here, stay here, relocate here.
Yep.
And I think to go backwards here a little bit, but in terms of what is our role and what isn't, I think I'm going to pick on Patrick and I because we both just kind of excuse this or, use the size of our programs as an excuse, right? We just highlight like, oh, it's only 200 people. Well, if we can show that something works or for those 200 people, here's the outcome or however few people, perhaps, I think it's definitely our role to know what works or be trying to determine what works. And it's perhaps not our role to make those opportunities for everybody at a statewide level immediately, right? But we can certainly figure out, okay, well, if that worked for those folks, or if whatever percentage of people who participated in X program had this certain outcome, then we can, apply our results-based accountability principles, and then we have reason to believe that investment in programs like this is better than doing nothing or will result in at least this little bit there. So I think scope is always a hard one. And actually, I don't know about the rest of you, but in some of the full board meetings, when we start talking like, oh, but then what about housing? It's like, that's a huge problem that this subcommittee is not going to solve. But I think even knowing that and knowing what some of the potential solutions would be is good. So.
Yeah, I think that's smart. I agree with you. I mean, they're small programs, but when you add them all up, similar to what Drake was saying, right? Maybe you start saying, well, they all are function differently, but the attributes of how they function, there's a similarity here that we could maybe pull a thread through and go, this is the theme that actually is having an impact here, even if it's practically different in each program.
Mm-hmm. All right. We don't have to. Oh, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say that Vermont was #1 in the country for the most population loss last year, and it was 1,800 and change people, which is a small amount of people. If we could figure out a way to get 500 of them to stay or move here, that's sort of where my head's at. Yeah.
Yes, and you know what? Now you're making me want to undermine my own comment about the scale of our programs because we have had, we rank very highly in the number of AmeriCorps members per capita, right? And of course, that's that whole per capita thing with Vermont. If California had as many AmeriCorps members per capita as we do, they would have more than all of the AmeriCorps members in the country. But that 200 folks ends up being more statistically significant, thank you, than it would be in a place like California. And we have that level of connection to each of those folks that they don't have other places, which is sort of our one of our strengths, is that it's
Exactly. Yeah.
you know, we can, I always say we did a data project, a research project that sort of got nipped midway through, but they were concerned about us being able to find everybody we wanted to talk to. I said, we have their phone numbers and there's only 40 of them. 100% of our sample is 40 people. I can track down 40 people. That's not that hard. I can drive around to all of them if I ultimately need to, which of course I didn't, but that's the other kind of perhaps strength we don't want to lose sight of, is we can actually, we're at a scale that it is not impractical for some of these programs to really get in touch with folks.
Yeah.
So I'm going to scoot us along a little bit without completely axing that off, because we may find ourselves talking about existing initiatives again. But let's start talking now about who else needs to be at the table. I heard career placement folks and missions folks thrown out as folks we want to talk to so far, but we're interested in the list of people, individuals, or types of people, or people with types of experience or sectors, or however you want to frame that. Throw them out.
Well, I'll add one that's not going to surprise Sabina at all. Some form of student or student alumni, right? I always get a little nervous trying to solve the problem of somebody that I don't have the experience of, but so maybe we pull somebody that has the experience that we can talk to hear what they're thinking.
Yeah.
I
So you read my
was
mind. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was thinking about how building connections around folks that either move here, come back here, or choose to stay here is important. And there are a number of, like, the Rutland Young Professionals. I think there are a couple other young professional groups that they might be able to have a really great insight into what's keeping people here or what people are looking for.
Agreed.
I think the Vermont Professionals of Color Network could also be a really good organization to tap into. And I think in that goal document, Phil, there's a lot of these folks listed. Because the young professionals thing, Betsy, I had forgotten about that. That's definitely a good idea.
Thank you for saying that, Drake. I'm pulling it up right now. There's some implementation partners listed in the right column here.
I wonder if there are, I've always wanted to create like a social benefits package, like where I've worked, and sort of like, are there, you know, business partners or, you know, thinking of like Parks and Rec that we can work to like build some sort of package around, like, this is why it's great to live in X community and here's your perks or something like that.
Mm-hmm. It'd be really good to do with some of the chambers and RDCs and like regional conversations. I like that idea a lot.
There's workplace coordinators in a number of the high schools. That might be a good voice to hear from.
ACCD shows up here on a couple spots, I think. Tourism and
Mm-hmm.
marketing. Chambers. I like, Betsy, thank you for framing that how you framed it. I'm not going to do your words justice, but I'm also thinking of kind of other sort of third space providers, because there's some kind of interesting organizations out there that are not quite, in some cases, they're not even that formal, but they're certainly providing connection to lots of different parts of community, or like the some of the mutual aid groups that sprung up during the flooding are now trying to take on more of a full-time mission of bringing people together and keeping people connected even when there are not disasters. So I wonder about some of those folks.
They're being, yeah.
I also recently participated in a panel that VBSR was doing in collaboration with Grossman School of Business around, I think it was called like Pathways to Stay, and it was all around like supporting graduates to stay in Vermont. So I think like, and it was inspired in part by y'all's goal on that. So I think there are a lot of folks working on this. I think there are a lot of folks that would be interested in being part of these conversations. And I do wonder, this is a pretty awesome list to start from. Do y'all, at what point do y'all want to like be inviting all of these folks to officially participate in the committee? Is it now? Is it once, there's a couple of activities or projects identified? Do we want to have folks come talk to you all about, data or their experiences or their barriers? There's a lot of different ways we could invite participation. And again, we don't have to figure it out now. This is just the first meeting, but would love any thoughts folks have on how we can best support inviting more people to the table.
I would love to bring them to the table sooner rather than later. And just get their perspective, have them share, and maybe from that group we build out, who actually joins us in a more permanent capacity.
I like that idea as well. Oh, go ahead, Savannah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're good.
I'm gonna jump in with a anecdote that happened to me last week. I happened to be out playing cribbage, and our partners were two young men, 25 and 30-ish. Neither of them are from the state of Vermont. They didn't go to college here either. They moved here and they absolutely adore it. And I was like, I got to get your stories. And if we could get somebody like that, that why they're here and why they love it, to be, to have it straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak, on the committee. And it was really an amazing conversation. One's at Global Foundries and the other's at Dynapower. They have nice engineering jobs, the whole bit.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah.
And I also, I love that. And I think there are probably going to need to be multiple ways that we're inviting folks to join us to really be able to get that participation, right? Like not everyone's going to be able to join a call on a Tuesday at 1 p.m. So I think there's an opportunity to think about like, how do we best engage, current students, alumni, young professionals, and maybe that's part of the work of the committee is like some focus groups or events or, whatever form works. I know in doing different types of it, it's great to have as many voices as possible at the table. And we also have to think about how we're making the table accessible for folks to join us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cribbage nights.
Cribbage nights, exactly.
Solve most problems.
You know that about me.
So on the committee membership piece, I've taken note of a lot of the suggestions that folks have, and my proposal would be for us to take a little bit of time and sort of format that and then send it to you all for you to let us know if that's the appropriate group or if there are more folks or different folks. And then we can start to do that outreach to invite folks to join. And the way non-board member committee participation works in the bylaws of the State Workforce Board is the executive committee approves non-board members to participate, which I think they are going to be happy to. But our plan is to be having that sort of be like a standing agenda item at monthly executive committee meetings as we're welcoming more and more folks to join the work. So it won't be a one-time thing, but happy to support getting that started.
So Drake, I think what I heard you say, and if you can correct me if I'm wrong, so you're going to take this list and start sort of formatting what that might look like, and then we'll sort of go back and, like, for example, we said chambers of commerce, and so more than likely we would probably want a member from a chamber of commerce as a, we're calling them permanent committee members, is that what we'd call it, or
I
approved
think
committee member. That
sure.
doesn't mean other chambers of commerce aren't part of our conversation. That's just who's working on the committee. So is that kind of the path here you're proposing?
I think so, and I don't want to make it overly rigid or prescriptive because I think there are a lot of folks who maybe don't have the time to be an official board member, but can be like a non-official member, or so I again just want the process to reflect the need, not the need to have to fit into whatever artificial process we're creating. But yes, I think I will take this list, build it out a little bit, send it to y'all. If folks can just share any input or edits or additions to that list, and then we can get started on having conversations with folks. And I will say we have been having conversations with folks even before the committees have started. Sorry about it. Just to sort of flag for folks that we're hoping they'll contribute to the work. But yeah, that's, I guess, the quick summary of what makes sense if that works for y'all.
I think that makes sense. And I think I'll add on to that when we go back to that question, what is our role? And we're saying convening and aligning and all of that. We've been doing some work on service to career pathways within the AmeriCorps world, but also more broadly. And pulling folks together for some of those conversations and casting kind of a wide net and seeing who can come in. And of course, not everybody can make daytime meetings, but then providing ways that they can participate otherwise has been really helpful in getting some pretty unique perspectives to the table that I don't know would have been there otherwise. So I like this idea of sort of working towards having some opportunities to really hear from people and hear what's going on in their world. Well, thanks everybody. And just on time, we're now at our wrap up and next steps. So next steps, we're going to get a list of proposed board members going for, sorry, committee members for us to look at. We have some follow-up questions about data, PSEO, etc. What's the follow-up on that? So we don't lose it.
I wonder if that might be a good topic for the next meeting of the committee is to discuss data.
It probably would be.
We can have Matt come and do an overview of PSEO and all of that.
Or like I think yes, and I think I liked where we were going with like what data would we want to have
The
too,
inputs.
like think. But
So kind of set the expectation for people between now and the next meeting to brainstorm on their own what those things are and then bring them for conversation.
And if it would be helpful too, I wonder if we'd want to start to think about engaging with like the UVMs and state colleges and independent colleges about what data they already have. Like that, we could probably do some of that outreach between now and the next meeting, because I also imagine those are going to be organizations that are on our membership list too. That I'm seeing nods. Okay.
Unanimous nods.
Love a unanimous nod. And while we're talking about it, I do want to share a data, oh my God, some data on workforce education at the Independent College Association. They were testifying last week in the State House and had a really interesting flyer that I haven't taken a super close look at yet, but it may be something that y'all are, oh God, I hope that works for folks.
Yep.
Okay, great. That could be a follow-up for y'all to take a closer read at that, and we can do, so my list of committee members sending back around to y'all for input and then having those initial conversations. We can also reach out to our higher ed partners to learn a little bit more about what data they have, and then y'all will be thinking about data, what would be helpful in an ideal world. And that can be at least a component of the next meeting, is talking about data. Does that sound correct?
That sounds good. And then we need to decide as well on a cadence for these meetings. And I think, Drake, monthly is what it sounds like some other subcommittees are heading towards to keep things moving, which sounded good to me, but open to input from others as well.
I'm not going to commit my boss to anything, so I'm going to be quiet.
No, Scott really wants it to be like every other week, but
Sure.
kidding. Would it be helpful if we send out like a doodle again,
Sure.
or are folks doodled out?
Doodles are good for finding dates. We can be doodled out and they can work too.
Okay, and so we don't have to decide like this committee meets every month, every 4 weeks on the dot, but would folks want to have the next meeting be sometime before the end of March? Is that too soon? Not soon enough? Okay. All right, and
That's a good
maybe for
compromise
now,
without too much commitment.
yeah, maybe for now it's just like at each meeting y'all decide when you want to meet next, and we can just keep it loose like that for now. Okay.
That sounds good. Well, Drake and Sabina, thank you for your support of this subcommittee,
Thanks.
and thanks everybody for your participation. I look forward to seeing you all again soon. And with that, I
Soon.
believe we are concluded.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. Good to see
Thanks.
you.
Yeah,
well,
take
everybody.
care.
Take care.
Bye.